Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for this special 4th of July edition of Faith Nation. From the CBN studio in the nation's capital, I'm Tara Mergener. The Declaration of Independence, which we are celebrating today, is an appeal to the Supreme Judge of the world. It follows a long tradition of covenants invoking God's blessing and promising to serve him throughout the earth. So often, though, it seems Americans forget this covenant. And as Paul Strand reminds us, that can have consequences.
Christian leader Dutch Sheets explains how God's relationship with us is set by sacred covenant.
He even based our salvation on, I'm coming to bring a new covenant through Jesus. The shedding of his blood ratifies this covenant. It is a binding together that in him is unbreakable.
Early English settlers in America also wanted their new land to share such a binding covenant with God. Christian historian Eddie Hyatt says those who came to Jamestown in 1607 put it in their Virginia Compact.
To propagate, to expand the gospel, the kingdom of the Lord Jesus Christ, and to take the gospel to people who were lying in darkness and had no knowledge of the one true God. They said that's the reason they had come.
The Pilgrims stated the same in 1620.
Having undertaken a voyage for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith.
John Winthrop, leading 700 Puritans to Massachusetts in 1631, said it like this.
We have entered into an explicit covenant with God to be his people in this new world. And they wanted to be that city on a hill. They wanted to be a model of Christianity for the rest of the world to see.
These early covenants pledged the signers to each other and to obeying the laws they'd form with God's guidance. Such compacts became the model for the U.S. Constitution, whose authors were also very much guided by their Christian faith. Historian William Federer.
George Washington, at the beginning of the Constitutional Convention, he said the event is in the hand of God.
So they saw the Constitution as being a very religiously based document. It was also a very covenantal based document.
Sheets says the makeup of the government was shaped by biblical passages like Isaiah 33:22. Writing in his book, Giants Will Fall, our nation's form of government was actually taken from Scripture. The Lord is our judge, judicial branch, lawgiver, legislative branch, and king, executive branch. The founders put God first and foremost in the Declaration of Independence.
It says right in there, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions. So in this founding document, we appealed to God. We invited him to be a part of this American experiment.
The concept of this being one nation under God harkens back to Jesus telling Jerusalem in Luke 13:34 that he wanted to hide you under my wings, covering and protecting you. What happens, though, is parts of the nation don't want to be under God, disregard parts of the Constitution, and no longer honor sacred oaths.
We have walked away from covenant with him.
And even the marriage covenant, with the divorce rate soaring more than 300% in the 20th century. America, once the #1 exporter of the gospel, is now the #1 importer of illegal drugs and the #1 exporter of pornography. Author Jerry Newcomb sums it up.
A lot of the things that we're experiencing in America today are because we have disregarded God's covenant.
If America really is to be the place from which the gospel is spread to the whole world, then the salvation of billions hangs in the balance. Sheets says there's hope, but only if Americans return to honoring their covenant with God, because that makes us his family.
If a kid across the street I don't know, if they do something that's evil or wrong, I feel no responsibility to try to bring them back into the fold because I'm not in covenant with them. I'm not in that relationship. God is the same way.
David Barton points out the faithfulness of the Lord.
I mean, we're told in Psalm 105, he keeps his covenant for 1,000 generations.
I don't think there's a stronger force in the world.
So there's a chance the nation can still someday completely fulfill the prophecy of destiny Jamestown chaplain Robert Hunt said in 1607 as he came ashore in Virginia.
He made this declaration, which I believe was prophetic. He said, from these very shores, the gospel shall go forth, not only to this new world, but to all the world. And that was just not very far from CBN.
It just takes getting back to covenant. As Joel 2:13 says, now return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Coming up, Fox News anchor Brett Baer has a deep interest in the history behind the drafting of our Constitution. We talk with him about today's leaders and what we can learn from our founding fathers when Faith Nation returns. As Americans, we sometimes forget the enormous price our founders paid to create a new nation. Author and Fox News anchor Bret Baier says current leaders could learn from those brave men, especially from First President George Washington. Wendy Griffith talked with Baier about his most recent book, To Rescue the Constitution, George Washington and the Fragile American Experiment. Take a look.
As an author, Fox News anchor Bret Baier seeks to bring historical figures like Patrick Henry and Paul Revere to life. This time around, in To Rescue the Constitution, he focuses on George Washington, who, according to Baier, is the only one who could have convinced a ragtag army to fight the British and believe they could win.
He had this ability to fire them up, and he had an ability in imposing this belief that liberty was worth fighting for. These guys, some of them didn't have shoes. They had bloody feet in the middle of Valley Forge in the winter, and yet they overtook the British forces.
What was it about George Washington, about his character, his person, that was so unique that, you know, was the glue that held everything together?
George Washington was this stoic figure who was well respected, and in his silence, he found common ground with the different disparate groups to be able to link everybody together for the good of the country.
As a man of faith, Washington also believed God was on his side.
You look at the miracle of bringing together all of these people and ratifying this document around a very tense time, that had to be a divine intervention of some kind.
And the fact that he even survived, because he wasn't just commander-in-chief from afar. I mean, he was on the front lines with his men, and he never got injured.
Yeah, and that also is pretty divine intervention, you would think. You know, it's a lesson for our times that you don't have to be the best, you don't have to be perfect, you just have to hustle and have faith.
And that belief helped Washington and his army to defeat the British. But even with a Declaration of Independence, the newly formed United States of America appeared anything but united or independent.
That time right after the war, it was really split, and people were wondering whether the U.S., which was not even the United States at that point, was going to go back to British rule.
Despite all this, Baier says George Washington held the country together, and in 1787 came the drafting and signing of the U.S. Constitution.
It's a unique document in the world, and there are a lot of people who say it needs to be adjusted and doesn't work right, but if you look really closely, it's held the test of time, and it has been a living and breathing document that enabled our country to operate in liberty.
What can our leaders in Washington, and really what can all of us learn from George Washington?
Dissent is okay. Don't be afraid of what feels like a very partisan time of different opinions, but listen first and try to find some common ground. Washington did that better than anyone.
And your book is called To Rescue the Constitution, and you believe that George Washington was the rescuer?
He was the rescuer. He's the reason that we have a Constitution. He is the one that essentially got it across the finish line. And without George Washington, we wouldn't have a country.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Washington.
Welcome back. If you are one of the millions of Americans flying this holiday, you know how high volume can lead to security line nightmares. From slipping off your shoes to taking out your laptop, there are a lot of steps before you get to your gate. But as Caitlin Burke reports, advances in technology might change that.
The terror attacks of September 11th, 2001 meant an immediate change in air travel, but enhanced security measures evolved over time.
Unfortunately, there's continued to have events that happen. You had the underwear bomber, which changed the way we looked at people screening, and all of a sudden body scanners became the norm. You had the shoe bomber. So there's all these events that took place, and so there's a lot of a reactive approach to it.
By being proactive, however, the TSA and its partners have worked to stay ahead of potential threats.
We need to continuously be innovative, and we need to continuously come up with new methods of improving security, we have to keep coming up with new methods of doing it, because our adversaries are also continuously looking at new ways to defeat what they know we have.
Kannan Krishnaswamy works at the U.S. Department of Energy's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. One of its missions is national security, and researchers are behind many of the screening technology in airports today.
The portals that you go through with your hands above your head, that came out of the laboratory. In fact, we lovingly at the laboratory, we call this the PNNL salute.
Those scanners use millimeter wave technology.
That technology, the basic technology and the basic invention came out in the 1990s. We've had that system or that technology available since the 1990s. Now, there was no real need for commercial deployment or deployment in the airports, because airport security at that time was very different.
The initial technology was actually marketed to be used in apparel fitting.
You stand in the portals, get yourself measured so that you have exact body measurements that can be transferred to somebody that's making clothes, and they can fit clothes for you accurately.
Then 9/11 catapulted millimeter wave technology to the forefront of national security.
So that's the older generation of the technology that is currently being sold even today at the airports.
PNNL researchers are constantly working on taking their technologies one step further, and now a second-generation millimeter wave system is close to being deployed.
The way HexWave works is, first of all, it's a walk-through portal, and it uses radio frequency and real-time 3D video rate imaging, so we can determine if an individual has a threat on their body. We've trained it to ignore some of the common benign objects, so you won't have to divest. So your phone, your keys, your belt, wallet, watches, glass cases. We use the AI so we can provide automated decisions to a security operator to process people at speed.
Bill Frayne, the CEO of Liberty Defense, which developed HexWave, says the key differentiator between it and existing technologies is the ability to detect non-metallic threats.
And as you know, the people trying to do and defeat the system to do harm, they're being more creative. They're using 3D plastic guns. They're using liquid explosives. They know that some of these metallic detection systems out there can't detect that.
Liberty has also licensed a shoe scanning technology from PNNL that can be used inside the HexWave or existing body scanners.
Imagine if you didn't have to take your shoes off at the airport. Talk about, passenger experience. That's probably top of the list when we talk to people who are going through the airports.
While this scanning tech is a few years away, the HexWave system will soon be deployed to screen aviation workers who access secure areas of airports. After that, the goal is for it to be used at all security checkpoints, allowing travelers to pass through without breaking stride.
The goal is high level of security and detection capability, but make it so that there's a low false alarm rate so you continue to process the passengers and make it a good experience.
Some other interesting technology coming down the pipeline includes the ability to differentiate between powders and liquids in checked baggage, and a way to detect explosives in their vapor form so that bomb-sniffing dogs are no longer necessary. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Honor, courage, and commitment, core values of the United States Marines. And while those in the Corps are considered some of the toughest around, most rely on faith in something much more powerful for their military service. Mark Martin traveled to a South Carolina boot camp and files this story of what some describe as God on the move among young Marines.
It just feels super honorable to have that title, United States Marine.
CBN News caught up with Jacob Watson as he was about to graduate from boot camp. He's following in the footsteps of both his parents.
It's like something I will never forget or take for granted. Plus, some of the stuff that I've learned was like stuff I never thought I could do. So it was really a blessing to be able to conquer most of these things that I was afraid about at first. But thanks to the Marine Corps, I was able to do.
Watson points to his Christian faith for helping him stay the course.
Without a doubt, the only way I believe at least I got through this was faith in Christ. Because a bunch of this stuff, like I said, mentally was, kind of scary and intimidating. But, faith, I'll tell you what, it gets you a long ways.
It's the same story for others here at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in Parris Island, South Carolina.
Throughout boot camp, reading my Bible and praying, it seemed to help me a lot. And I remember thinking maybe I can't go through this, but I remember just thinking, well, if I have come this far, then God can definitely get me through the rest of it.
Through forming week, I was really just in my head, really, and I needed some help. We went to church, and I was praying to the Lord at night, and I was asking for some words of encouragement. And that next day, 3 songs back to back, just you're an overcomer. He's in a fight. You're in the fight to the final round. So I fought all the way throughout boot camp.
Here's the chapel at Parris Island Marine Corps Recruit Depot. There are 9 chaplains on duty at this installation, and one of their roles is to make sure that every person has the right to practice his or her faith and is free of discrimination.
I'm ensuring that that their First Amendment right is being constitutional right is being protected to exercise their religion.
Lieutenant Dawn Ashley is one of the 9.
I care for them, and that sometimes is through counseling, a lot of times through counseling here at Parris Island, because it's boot camp and they're stressed a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, so we care for them pastorally also.
She said, I wrote this down when you said it, and I meditate on it. I pull it out when I'm having a hard time. I pull it out when things feel like they're really closing in on me, and it gives me a sense of hope. And so as a chaplain, that was one of those moments where I realized that the work that we do really does impact people. It really does kind of buoy their spirit and help them grow in their walk of faith.
Those who we get the honor of serving here, regardless of their faith, we have found that spirituality plays an important part. And for those that are Christians, we've really seen how they have received breakthrough from all of their past challenges, breakthrough while they're here, and we see them really evolve to their higher level of self through Christ Jesus. And we're so honored that we get to love on them, to support them, and to walk alongside with them in this journey.
A lot of times they run away from the faith. They get here and they think they can do it on their own, and they quickly understand that they can't do it on their own. They need God. They need that connection with God. And so a lot of them come back to their faith while they're here.
Jesus means everything to me.
As a drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Evelyn Espinal must be tough as nails to train these recruits. Still, she faces difficult times and shared how the love and strength of God gets her through.
It was a very, very, very emotional time for me. I don't cry often, but when it comes to God and Jesus, I bawl my eyes out. And I needed that. I really needed that. I needed that strength to push through because I was struggling. It was my first years as a drill instructor. Those are the hardest years.
Captain Stephen Sigmund hopes how he lives his Christian faith will be seen and possibly inspire fellow Marines.
Definitely not perfect by any means. No one really is, and Christ did not expect that out of folks either. But to be able to, maybe one person at a time, have someone look at you and say, you know, they are different. There's something that's maybe different about them. And hopefully letting some form of Christ in me manifest itself to be able to have an example that maybe I'm making an impact on one person in each unit that I go to.
Allowing his faith to make an impact, an action Sigmund describes as fulfilling God's calling to be the change or light in the world. Mark Martin, CBN News, Parris Island, South Carolina.
Still ahead, while the presidential election heats up, one well-known pastor is urging Christians to rise above the political tension. Faith Nation is back in just 2 minutes. Conflicts in Congress and the presidential election have political conversations more heated than ever, with some of those issues even dividing churches. One prominent pastor and author seeks to be a voice of reason. CBN's Charlene Aaron recently spoke with Dr. Tony Evans about what he calls a kingdom alternative.
In his book, Kingdom Politics, Returning God to Government, Dr. Tony Evans highlights the importance of seeing government from God's point of view and offers a biblical path through one of the most divisive issues of our time.
What motivated you to do a deep dive Bible study on politics?
What motivated me was the chaos, confusion, and divisiveness that I was seeing among Christians, where we were allowing the political landscape to inform our biblical worldview rather than our biblical worldview informing the political landscape.
During an appearance on CBN's Prayer Link, Dr. Evans offered advice for talking with those we disagree with politically.
Believers should always speak with grace. We should always speak with a spirit of love without compromising truth. But we always start with truth because that's God's perspective. We want to make biblical points, which should always be done with the spirit of humility, grace, and love.
A love not partial to one political side or the other.
God is not a Democrat or a Republican. He doesn't ride the backs of donkeys or elephants. So he is the consummate independent.
He stresses how Americans' vote is often tied to issues from their own lives.
If we were back in slavery and there were two candidates running for office, and one was for abortion but against slavery, and the other one was for slavery and against abortion, if you're a slave, you may be against abortion, but you're going to vote for the one who's against slavery because that is your situation in life. People's situation in life will affect what they prioritize, and what they prioritize will determine how they vote.
Priority, he cautions, should not be placed above Christian faith.
When you look to politics as a solution, you have idolized that institution above the God that created it. And so unfortunately, today we have Democratic and Republican Christians who are political idolaters.
Reasons he points to a spiritual solution.
What we're experiencing now in our culture is what I call the passive wrath of God. What we're seeing today is chaos. You can't solve what's wrong in our culture today by Air Force One, okay? Wow. 2 Chronicles 15, verse 3-6 says there was chaos in the land, for God troubled them with every kind of distress. If God is your problem, it doesn't matter who you elect. If God is your problem, you better get that straight.
In the end, only one thing really matters.
You should pray for local and national leaders that they will be influenced to make the right decisions. But prior to praying for them, we need to pray for us. If we're not getting right, if we're not unified, if we're not bibliocentric in our focus, if we're not applying consistently God's regulations, guidelines, and governances in where we live and the influence we have, then we can't expect the culture to change. Or to put it another way, until God can fix the church, he won't fix the nation.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
And that's going to do it for Faith Nation. Have a great night.